Hey everybody, I'm Izzy. Welcome back to my Maker's Playground, and today we're talking about something really cool that I think is very important. My 5 favorite things that I use on my table saw constantly. So I'm sure you guys have heard it said a million times, the table saw is the heart and soul of a woodworking shop. I don't necessarily agree with that because without you, the table saw just sits here and looks pretty. It doesn't really do anything. The same with every other tool in the shop. Without the human interaction, it's pretty much worthless. So the most important thing I think, starting with every table saw, is the blades that you put in your table saw. Now I have one blade that I use very specifically for just about everything, whether it's MDF, plywood, cutting hardwood, it's the same blade. I don't spend time switching out blades and going through all those different crazy combinations of blades. About the only time I do switch out my blade is if I'm going to be cutting plastic or polycarbonate. So the blade that stays in my table saw pretty much 99% of the time is the Electro Blue Prestige 40 tooth 10-inch from Amana. Now I buy all of my blades from bpway.com, and I'll put a link in the description box below. Now let me tell you a little bit about this blade. So this is a thicker blade. So with a blade like this, you're going to want a saw that has at least 1.5 horsepower. 3 horsepower is much better. But you get an amazing finish with this, and I've tried the 60 tooth as well, but for some reason the 40 tooth blades seem to last so much longer. I keep one in my saw for about 3 months. Now that being said, this only costs about $20, $25 more than one of the cheap blades that you'll get from Diablo at like the big box store. And this will outlast them 10 to 1. Literally, I'll use it every single day for 3 months before I have to switch it out. So this is the cut I would get off of that 40 tooth. This blade is 3 months old, and I'm just about to change it out. Now you can see just a little tiny bit of blade mark in there, but I mean, it's nothing that I can't take away with a piece of sandpaper a lot faster than it would take to change the blade out for a higher tooth count blade. So the right blade brings me to my next 2 tools. This particular one is the magnetic micro square. Has 2 magnets on the bottom. It's a machinist square, and I can use that to make sure that my blade is perfectly up and down to the bed of the table. Now that's very important if you're doing precision cuts and you want to get really good angles. The way you get a really good angle is make sure that your blade is perfectly square with the bed, and then you use a digital block. So once you have your blade perfectly square, you can zero out your calibrator or block, mini digital protractor, slap it on here, and then you can change the angle of your blade and get it exactly to the angle that you want, provided you put it on the right side of your blade. Now when it comes to getting really accurate angles, this is super nice, but there's another method that I probably use even more often. This is a miter set. I use this tool so much that I embedded it right into the wing of my table saw. The way it works is simple. I've got a couple pins that I store here on top of my fence. If I want to square up my miter gauge, I just drop one in the 0 pin and one here in the 0 pin, and then I can push my miter gauge up against it, and that zeroes it out to exactly 90 degrees. Now, if I want to change that angle to something else, I can do all kinds of fun things. Leaving one in the 0 pin, I can put one in the 7 pin. That means that's an angle to cut 7 segments. Just push it up against there, tighten it down, and that is the exact perfect angle to cut 7 segments. Now, I like the mini digital gauge or the mini digital protractor for things like setting 45s or 22.5s, but when it comes to figuring out angles for things like 7 segments or 9 segments or 5 segments or 13 segments or as high as 20 segments, I'm not going to do the math. I'm simply going to set this up, cut a piece on my table saw, and use that as a gauge to set the angle so I can do columns that are that angle. Yeah, now I know I have the perfect angle to cut column pieces with 6 sides. So the miter set comes with two options. It comes with the segmented one that has 1 through 20 segments. And it comes with the second option, which is all angles. So it has a plate in here and 2 pins, so you can set any angle between 0 and 55 degrees. So I would highly encourage you to check out the miter set. I'll leave links for all this stuff in the description box below. I use mine literally daily. So a lot of times it's just to put a 90-degree angle on my miter fence or my miter gauge, and it's just a peace of mind that I know every time I do that it's exactly 90 degrees. Next up is a new to me product of sorts. I use feather boards very rarely. Now I would like to use them more often, but for the most part they're kind of inconvenient to use. When you're using a feather board, you get a lot nicer cuts. You can focus on the feed rate of the material through the blade, and to get a really nice cut, you want to have a consistent feed rate from start to finish when you're cutting through the table saw. You don't want to pause. Now obviously, for safety reasons, if you have to pause, by all means pause. But if you don't have to, you're going to get a much better cut. It's going to mean less sanding and less work on the back end. But MagSwitch came out with some new products that my friend Andy Klein invented. Well, he put some products together. So now they created a feather board that has magnets in it, so I'm no longer confined by the miter slot here to lock this in place. I can literally put this anywhere on my table saw, lock it in place, and it's good to go. So it's super fast to use, super convenient, and if it's fast and convenient, why not use it way more often? And if you've been watching my last few videos, you've pretty much seen me use it almost every time I use the table saw, unless it's just in a position where I don't need it, if I'm ripping something really thin or something really, really wide. Now this is kind of a 2-for-1. They've got a couple of them. So if you have a wider Bismeier style fence, you can use the one on top that also helps hold material down. And to set that, just put it over your material, lock it in place, loosen this nut here, and then you can move this up and down to adjust it to where you want it. Once you have it adjusted, lift it back up and put it directly next to the blade like that. So this one can go next to the blade. This one cannot. You want this in front of the blade. If you happen to put it next to the blade and you pinch that material, you're setting yourself up for a really exciting cut, meaning it's probably going to kick back at you, bind, or do something nasty you don't want to happen. So feather boards that are flat on the table, make sure that they are before the blade, just slightly before the blade. And if hold down feather clamps, you can put right next to the blade provided there's room. If there's not room, put it before the blade and have somebody help you on the outside of the feed to make sure you pull that all the way through at this consistent feed rate. I don't know if you can see that or not, but that cut is done with the 40-tooth blade in hardwood, and that is gorgeous. A couple swipes with some 150 and I'm ready for finish. So there's pretty much just a quick and dirty video to talk about 5 things that I love on my table saw, or that I use on my table saw constantly. The MagSwitch stuff is all new to me, but I gotta tell you, after 30 years in the business, I wish I would have had this a long time ago. It's just easy to use, so why not use it? Now, the blade, absolutely, probably the most important thing we talked about today was the table saw blade. A good table saw blade in your table saw will make all the difference in the world. Now, if you don't have a saw that's a 1.5 horse or better, don't buy this blade. You'll be disappointed because it takes a lot of energy to keep that big, fatter blade going. But if you do, I'm telling you, try this blade out and you won't go back. So having some way to 90 up that blade, so using the Micro Mag square, it's just super quick and easy. It's a hands-free operation. And the digital protractor, that's probably one of those things that you could live without, especially if you're going to have the miter set or have the miter set. It's just one of those things it's convenient when you're just trying to set a quick 45 or a quick 22.5, and you don't want to do any math. Miter set is obviously, if you're going to pick between the two, go with the miter set. You just don't have to do any math, and it just makes life so much easier. I'll definitely leave links in the videos. I'll definitely leave links for videos in the description box below for the miter set and all the products here today. Some are affiliate links, some aren't. If you do use them, definitely appreciate it. It does help out the show. If you have experience with some of these tools, talk about it down below. Let's hear your feedback. I'd love to hear some feedback on any of one of these products that you guys use. As always, thank you so much for watching. Hope to see you in the next video.